Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to video number 5. Yeah, 5 in the Ultimatum series. Last episode we were focusing on the wings. We got our light installation finished. We got all of our surfaces done on the wings and we got the gear doors started. So if you missed that one, make sure you check out that episode. It's a good one to start progressing on the gear doors. This episode we're going to focus on the gear doors plus the rest of the build. The gear doors are going to take some time to go through the steps of glassing, painting, fitting, all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be kind of progressive throughout the rest of the build. So hang tight and we will continue with the Hispano Aviation Ultimatum. All right guys, last episode we finished with getting the gear doors sort of fit. The first thing we're going to start off with here is getting these doors fiberglass. So I'm going to grab some wax paper and we will get started on fiberglassing these doors. All right, so we have our gear doors laid out here. So I've just got simply a piece of foam down, a piece of parchment paper. Our gear doors are laid down with our label facing up, which is like our left or right label. And we've got 2 layers of 3/4 ounce cloth on top of the gear doors. I don't have any fancy bagging systems or anything like that, so we're just going to do this how I would normally do it. So we've mixed up some West Systems epoxy, and now what we'll do is we will just paint that on. All right, so I probably mixed too much of our epoxy, but that's okay. So we'll just simply paint it on. Come on. Now, rather than cut the pieces out individually, I opted to do one big piece, and I've got them kind of nested as close as I can. Okay, so initially I put it on quite heavy, and I can see like this leg door there, the wood has soaked up a lot of the epoxy. And but one thing that happens is your glass will also float to the top of the epoxy. So that is something to keep in mind. It may look like it's dry, but it's because the glass is floating. Okay, so I'll do this in my normal method. What we're going to do is we're going to put some absorbent material, paper towel down, and then we will put another layer of parchment paper and another layer of foam. And that'll allow us to pick up a bunch of the extra epoxy that's on there. And we'll worry about making it smooth with our primer coats. Okay, so we'll lay down paper towel, shop towel, and yes, I mixed way too much West Systems. We'll put another layer of, actually we'll do 2 layers of shop towel because it's going to get wet fairly easily. Another layer of paper towel. And another one of these. These pieces of foam that I'm using, they're inserts for turbines. And they're actually quite useful for lots of different things, like this. So we'll just push down on that. Nice. There we go. Okay, so that is glassing the gear doors. We've sucked up all of our extra epoxy and we will just leave that to do its thing now. And That's going to be a tomorrow thing, so you want to let this cure for 24 hours. And then what we'll do is we will cut these guys out. flip them over, and do the same thing on the interior side. So this is part of the reason why the videos now are going to hop all over the place, meaning that we're going to do a little step on the gear doors and then move on to other stuff, a little step on the gear doors and then move on to other stuff. And doing the gear doors will be a rest of the video type scenario. So with that done, we will move on to probably the fuel tanks. All right, so we're moving on to the tanks. Pulled the bungs out here, and you can see that the bungs or the pickups are all done already. So we've got two different pickups here. They're essentially the same layout. The little bit longer one is going into the main tank. The shorter one goes into the other tank. That's to compensate for the extra size. So what we're going to do now is we're going to rinse these tanks out. So we'll put a little bit of rubbing alcohol in each of the tanks. They're actually pretty clean. There's just a little bit of dust and stuff on the inside, but I suspect that purely based on design, because these are put together in pieces, there's a lot less residual dust than the tanks, the Kevlar ones that come with something like a Skymaster aircraft where they're drilling holes once the tank's actually made. So anyways, we're going to rinse these out, and then we're going to put the fuel bungs back in. And one thing I want to do is I want to fill these up and check the volume. So we'll do that, and just so we have a good idea of exactly how much fuel is going in each of these units. Okay, so we put fuel in both tanks, both held fuel beautifully and all that kind of stuff, leak-free. The bottom tank has 3 liters, top tank has 0.8 liters, so our total fuel capacity is 3.8 liters. Now you can't put your line going in between the tanks in because the cross brace in the fuselage sits right here, so anything you were to connect here needs to come out. I mean, I guess you could undo the bung, but that's not a great idea. So our fuel path here, our UAT is going to pull from the top tank. So when we fill our UAT, it's going to fill this tank, come out the vent, go through this line, fill the bottom tank, out the vent, to the outside port of the fuselage. So the bottom tank's going to drain first as our primary tank, which is going to work out awesome because our top tank is going to act like a bubble tank or a secondary UAT, obviously with more volume. So really what happens here with the V-Speak system going in this aircraft, what we can do is we can set the fuel capacity to 3,800 milliliters, and when we get down to 3 liters, that is landing time, and we can have an alarm on our radio, on our jetty, fuel capacity, all that stuff, and basically tell us exactly when we're out of fuel and we need to start doing our landing phases, which is when our 3 liters is gone. So cool setup. So tanks are basically done, ready to go. What I'm working on now is the tail section and getting the afterburner light done. I want to get that done before we start to move any further forward. So I'm going to start working on the afterburner lights. I did have to run another string because our afterburner light has 2 leads. I forgot about that. Now this afterburner light is the same light as their top of the line one from Unilight. It just doesn't have the little cooling things on them. So still going to have lots of power, lots of output, but doesn't have the little cooling buttons on them, I guess you can call them. But there's the 2 wires there, and we'll worry about getting that fit in a little bit. Now I did put the linkage on the rudder system, and I wanted to put that linkage on just to be able to check. Now our movement here, that's going to be about full there. Now our movement calls for 37 millimeters in the manual, and we are very shy. We're at 24 right now. So what happened was we took one of the MKS servo arms, and we are currently installed in the middle hole right there. So I'm going to switch that servo arm out, and we're going to have the full length 1-inch servo arm, and that's going to give us full throw. So we will switch that out. Not a huge deal right now, but we've marked that, set it aside, and we know that we need to switch the rudder horn out. Okay, so working on afterburner light here, and we did a couple things. Number one, I've never actually used the disperser thing, I think is what it's called. This actually fits beautifully over top of the LEDs, and what it does is it helps to spread out the light. And I think in this kind of situation, this makes sense to use this. In a situation like on the F4 as an example, where the the light is sitting inside of a cone and the light's bouncing all over the place. Not really necessary, but in this kind of situation, it's going to provide a better look at the back end of the aircraft. So we're going to use it. What I did just to test this is I heated it up with my heat gun just to make sure that it's not going to melt, because it's plastic, but obviously there's many different types of plastics, and I heated it up very hot and it was good. So anyways, that is what we're going to install over this. Now, if you remember when we first tried putting this on, it was actually sitting on the outside of the fuselage. So I did a couple things here to help make it fit. Now, this whole shape here in the fuselage is oval, okay? And the pipe obviously is round. So what I did was I took the pipe back out, put a little bit of a relief cut on each side. So I just ground down the former like a millimeter. And what that allowed it to do was the pipe to get a little bit oval shaped. Then I took the afterburner ring, laid it down, and I was quite careful here because you can't really put pressure on those LEDs because you just pop them off. So I had two bits here sitting in between the LEDs, and those were sitting like this in my clamp. Like that, and I took that LED ring and clamped it to make it a little bit oval. Now when I'm talking about making it oval, guys, I'm talking about like a millimeter, like it's hardly anything. And what that did was when we put this all back together, the aluminum ring of the afterburner light is now recessed inside the fuselage, which is exactly what I was going for. So that worked out absolutely awesome. So we'll put a little bit of silicone here on the perimeter, and that's just going to hold it in place. And then we will put a little bit of silicone on the disperser ring when we put that on, and then we have a nice finished look there, and I think it's going to be awesome. So happy that that went on like it did. So just planning out the location of the Unilight Afterburner controller, and I'm going to put it on the back side of the tank here. This is the side that faces the turbine side, and that is going to be a good location for our wires for the afterburner just to come up. We'll run them and they'll go right to the tank. So nice, easy location, and then we'll make sure we run our power and throttle channel leads down underneath the tank here so we can plug those guys in. So nice and simple. And that brings up a great opportunity to talk about today's video sponsor. All right, and today's video has been sponsored by Solder Stick. I absolutely love these connectors, and when I'm dealing with a light system on an aircraft like this, these are a perfect solution for this type of scenario. So what happens is when you're running the wires, I usually end up cutting the ends off like this, and oftentimes you're in the aircraft like this. The lead only comes to like here on the turbine, and it's quite difficult to solder inside the aircraft. And the solder stick units are phenomenal. They are so quick, so easy, huge time saver. I like using them with a lighter. So like in a situation like this, you can use a lighter to put them together inside the fuselage. Absolutely awesome. Let's take a look at how these things work. Now, before we do that, I've got a discount code for you guys if you order from Solder Stick. So in the comments below and in the video description, you'll find a link to Solder Stick's website and a code, RC20. That discount code gets you 20% off your orders at Solder Stick. So definitely use that code. It's a huge discount. I like having the 500-piece kit. This has tons of amazing connectors in here. Now I'm pretty much using the white, the red, and the blue. Those are kind of my commons. On something like these Unilight wires, the red are pretty much perfect and super easy. So let's take a look at how easy these things are to use. All right, guys, so scenario like this is the connector that we cut off, and we actually need to extend this just a little bit to make a little bit longer lead so it reaches the controller for the Unilight system. So in this case, I've stripped off about 5 millimeters of material, and what we'll do is put both of the wires in the center location on the solder stick. Now what we'll do is just take the lighter, and I like to work the ends first with the lighter to get them sealed off. Both ends. Now when I do this, I'm holding the blue flame on the connector. Now once our ends are sealed off, then I'll start working the center, and boom, the solder has melted. It's formed into its position on the wires. And there we go. So that is a connect. Oh, I'm trying to get it in the screen for you. So that is a successful connector, super easy, done. So we'll add our extensions on with the solder sticks, figure out how much we need, and then we'll solder this on inside the aircraft, which is super easy. So guys, when I first saw these things years ago, I didn't think they worked. I did a testing video specifically on the solder sticks. There's a link down below in the video description if you want to check it out. I encourage you to check it out because there's a lot of naysayers. These things are amazing, huge time saver. They work awesome. I'm all about being productive when I'm putting these planes together, and these things help a lot with productivity. So check them out. Information down below. And thank you, Solder Stick, for sponsoring today's video. All right, guys, so we are working on our wiring now. So our wiring for the afterburners is all run to this location, so that's done, that's good. We still need to put the turbine back in, but we're gonna get our wing wires done first, and then we'll pop the turbine back in. Finished up the afterburner light here, so put the housing on. And then I actually took silicone and put that all the way around the perimeter. Gives a nice finished look. It's gonna hold this, the diffuser piece in place. That's the word I was looking for, diffuser. So it's gonna hold the diffuser in place and finishes it so there's a nice non-gap all the way around. So anyways, that's gonna look awesome. The whole back end of that tail is gonna glow. So we've got all of our power box wire run here. I did have to open up the openings just a little bit, and this allows our 9-pin connector to fit in there, no problem. So we're gonna do this with both the different connectors on each, the fuselage and the wings, so there's no way to mix these up. So all in all, the wings require 18 wires. So if we look at all of the servos on here, we've got 3. I'm going to talk about wires, so 3 for the gear door, so 3, 6, 9, that's one connector. And then we've got 3 for the lights. That's the whole light housing. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if we can put the Sky Candy light on here, 8, 9. So we need 2 9-pin connectors to run everything. So we'll do our 3 servos on one lead, everything else on another lead, and there's only one way to connect those. So the excess wire that's coming out of the wing and the fuselage, that's going to slip into the fuselage. So when we put the wings on and connect everything, the excess is going to go inside the fuselage, and there's a nice spot down there. No issues with contact with turbine and stuff like that. Lots of room inside. So that's going to work out awesome. So what we've done here is we've cut 12 lengths of wires, so 6 per side, and we need to get all of our connectors done up. Now all of our lines are the same length, so they run from this point all the way forward into the fuselage right here. Now that allows complete forgiveness in how everything gets set up and plugged in, so there's no issues with wire length. Uses a little bit more wire, but you're only talking maybe 6 inches per piece, so you know, maybe only a few feet of wire. So all right guys, it's the next day, and our doors here are all dry and cured. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take an X-Acto knife and we'll trim out the perimeter of the doors. This is a good reason to make sure that you put a little bit more epoxy on here than is needed, because it stiffens up the gear doors, or the fiberglass around the gear doors. So then cutting it off is a heck of a lot easier. So all we do now is we just take that, that door and we can just simply trim all the way around it. So fairly simple. There we go. So this, one of the keys to putting the epoxy on here and the fiberglass is this is only 1/16 inch plywood, but now with that fiberglass on there, it is incredibly stiff. And once we add it to the back side, it's going to be even more stiff. So we basically do the same thing for all the doors, then we flip them over and do the identical process on the back side, and we'll revisit this tomorrow when it's all cured. All right, there's a shot for you of the finished doors on the other side, just like the first side there. So we've gone ahead and completed our wiring harnesses. Now the one thing I'm doing a little bit different than I would normally do on a plane is I'm going to put all my servo ends on now. Now the reason I'm doing that is because they are all sized pretty much for that entire front tray, so that's not a problem. So we've gone ahead and done up our connectors for the wings. Now we've got the wings inverted connectors, right, so they can't be mixed up. But we've got one wing and the other wing right there. So what we're going to do here is these are going to be put together like this, so the clips are on opposing sides, and we're going to put some snakeskin, which is sitting right there. That's going to be installed along here. It's going to come about halfway on the wiring, and then we've got all of our labels here as well too. So we're going to label each wire, put the end on each wire, and then that step is complete and done. All right, so we've got our wiring harnesses all done up here, and I'll just give you a shot of this one before we put it in. So we marked both sides of our ashlock connectors with labels, so that is all done. Of course, we've got a piece of snakeskin. That snakeskin brings us to this former, and then the wires are ahead of that. And then all of our wires have been pre-labeled, so the connectors are all done, labels are all on, which is awesome. I like this better than doing it inside the fuselage, but that's not always possible. And then there's a shot of the wiring harness coming forward, and you can see the snakeskin there comes past the former, which is fine. And then we've got all of our wire leads, which are plenty long enough to go through our layout. So we're going to get the other harness installed, and then we just need to figure out or fasten the base here. Just so it's not going to move around or anything. And then after we get that done, our wiring is basically done for the wings and the back section, because we've got our leads also done here for the afterburner light. And then we'll be able to put the turbine back in and potentially the tank. Need to think about that, but we may put the tank in at this point. We'll see. Okay, and one more step forward in the gear doors. So both sides have been glassed, which is great. With that light fiberglass, the 3/4 ounce cloth, it's a very, very tight weave. So there's a little bit of texture on the surfaces now, but they are awesome. As far as fit goes, we haven't changed the fit. They still fit great. And we've cleaned up the edges, and that is all good to go. So what we can do now is we can start priming these pieces. So what we do is we are going to prime this, sand it, prime it, sand it, and get it nice and smooth. Okay, so both wiring harnesses have been completed. We've got them glued down with some electrical tape and a little bit of CA on both sides. And turbine is reinstalled for the last time. So that is done now. It's nice and centered in the pipe. We've double checked that. And all of our screws are tight and ready to go. So I think the next thing we're going to do is we are going to reinstall the tank. And I think the reason for that is because there's nothing really going to be in the way. And that's kind of the next step to having progress towards the front end and having all the wiring and everything installed. Now, we're going to be flip-flopping back and forth as we've talked about. We still have to do the front gear installation, and that may be the one reason to leave the tank out of the aircraft, but I'm going to see. So we're going to pop the tank in, check it out, and then we'll have to start to get the nose gear installed so we can figure out our gear door and start that progressing as well. All right, guys, we got the tank installed. Now, Ward, who likes to come and help me out, he actually asked a good question, and this is a question that is totally valid, so I thought I'd share it with you guys. Why didn't we put the afterburner light controller on the front board? So there's really not a lot of rhyme or reason to it. I guess my reasoning, or what I told him, was the room on the front board disappears real quick. So here's our front board. It's a nice sizable piece, but you know, you've got a UAT that's fitting here, your central box, your gyro, batteries, all that kind of stuff, your gear controller. So this board's going to get eaten up real quick. And so I just like to spread stuff like that out. And we didn't have to lengthen our Unilight leads to the afterburner all the way forward. Not that that's a big deal, but we did have to lengthen the afterburner controller power and servo lead to the front here. So, but we hit it back here. It's a nice little spot for it. And it's nice and hidden and out of the way and clean looking. So we've got our two leads here. This is our afterburner control, which is essentially a throttle. And then we've got our afterburner power. And we've done this in silicone wire. And that's coming to our front mess. So what we're going to do now is we're going to flip the fuselage upside down, probably put it on a Robart stand, and then we're going to get the front landing gear installed. And the reason for that is so we can, kind of like the main doors where we get the landing gear installed, then we can do the cutout on the door and see what we're going to end up doing. Now the gear door opening that's currently in this plane is kind of wide, and then it gets narrow near the back. We're probably going to have to widen that out all the way so we're a nice even shape all the way around. Otherwise, hinging it would be virtually impossible. So we're going to get this thing flipped upside down and we'll get that gear installed. Oh, and in case you're wondering, built a mezzanine yesterday. So things have changed a little bit in the shop. If you see the background looking a little bit different, well, that's why. Okay, so we've got the nose leg kind of put in place, and there's a couple important pieces here. So number one, the opening isn't long enough in the fuselage. So we've got our gear tucked all the way back. It's sitting against that cross brace there. Now I wouldn't want to sand out that cross brace because it's probably a fairly important part of the structure. So what we want to do in this case is you can see here at the front, our wheel actually rubs on the fuselage. So we've got to take a little bit of that out. So we're just going to round that off a little bit, probably taking about 3-ish millimeters, I think, is going to be fairly realistic. And then what we're also going to do is, this is the area I was talking about with squaring it off. So we can't keep this shape. And so what we'll do is we'll just make this a nice even shape all the way. So essentially we're getting rid of the blue. We don't even really need to mark this out because we're just going to follow those paint lines back. The other benefit to doing that is it does allow us better access to the fasteners for the landing gear. So we've got, right now we'd have to come in at a bit of an angle. I guess you could drill holes. I wouldn't do that. If we get rid of that little bit of blue, then we've got better access to the fasteners. So we're going to do our sanding right now and get that stuff done, and then we will take a look at this again. All right, so we opened this up successfully. It is all clean and straight and nice and square now at this point. And you can see the only difference here is where our thickness was before to the part that we actually sanded out. This has the foam material in the layup, so that won't cause us any issues, but just obviously you can see that difference. Now, one of the other things here with the gear is the leg sticks out just a fraction past the fuselage. So you can see the gaps there. So what we're going to have to do is put a couple washers underneath the back part of the gear, and that's going to tilt the gear down a little bit. And once we do that, the nose sits in the fuselage nicely. So we've got power hooked up to it now. We'll cycle it here for the first time. Awesome. No servo installed yet at this point, but it is nice and smooth. And gear back up. Beautiful. Awesome. So what we're going to do now is we're going to basically make a gear door using the same method we did on the wings. So we're going to put tape across the fuselage and cut out our template, and we will be making the nose gear door. Once that's made, that'll follow the same pattern as the main wings. But that is going to be it for this video. We're going to make the nose gear door in the next video. All right, guys, and that is everything for this episode. The Ultimatum, which of course is upside down right now, is progressing very nicely. I think perhaps the next video could be maybe our last. We'll have to see how things go. There's really, when we think about it, there's not a whole lot left to do on this aircraft. The gear doors are definitely the biggest step to getting this thing finished. So that's going to be a bit of the, quite a bit of the next video, and we'll try and sum that all up, the rest of it in one video, and of course equipment installation, test runs, all that stuff. So maybe 2 more videos, we'll see how things go. But she's coming together beautifully. Very, very nice aircraft. If you guys have any questions or comments, obviously list them down below. Don't forget to give the video one of these. If you're not a subscriber, I don't know why you're not a subscriber, but hit that subscribe button down below, and we'll see ya in the next video.